Here it is, finally, the Elden Ring Nightreign review. Elden Ring Nightreign is developed by FromSoft. It's a multiplayer action RPG Souls-like and sprinkled with a little bit of roguelite elements. You play as one of 8 Nightfarers in a 45-minute high-octane action-packed run to defeat Night Lords. And there are 8, by the way. It was conceptualized post-release of Dark Souls 3, but fully realized after they developed Elden Ring. It has a nice core loop gameplay that is fun, and honestly it's a fresh take on the Souls genre. So let's start by dissecting it. Going up first, gameplay and mechanics. You open up the game, you pick one of 8 Nightfarers, each with a distinct moveset, playstyle, and abilities. And then you queue up. The Nightfarer's abilities might not seem that deep at the beginning. You'd think they're just basic abilities that can be used to do a lot of things, but honestly, once you get like a closer look at them, you realize that you can do some really cool stuff with it. For example, Wilder, you can use his ult in tandem with the hook to cancel out the channel time for the ult, or Recluse, for example, one of my personal favorites by the way. She can basically absorb elemental damage from enemies, and based on the 3 types of elements you have, a spell can be cast later on, and there are many different types of spells. Like honestly, if you try to Google them, you still won't remember much of what you're doing, but it's very cool. And lastly, one of my favorites, the Executor, or Executor, depending on how you like to pronounce it. In his ultimate transformation form, you can actually like clear out many mobs with ease or try to stagger bosses, but it's also very good for other things like healing allies, which was a surprise to me after like probably 12 games of playing him. And he also got like a nice finisher move that can stagger enemies and end your ultimate form early, which was quite a pleasant discovery for me personally. But yeah, not to take too long talking about Nightfarers and their abilities, they're fun, and they're different. Moving on, Souls veterans will have a better time adapting to the game because of the boss knowledge they have from previous games like Elden Ring and Dark Souls. So you'll have an easier time assimilating yourself to the game because you already know what the bosses are gonna do, as opposed to a new player. But that doesn't mean it's inaccessible to newer players because, well, multiplayer helps makes things easier. And aside from queuing up with randoms who think they are the edgelords who are gonna one-shot everything in their path and then just run off alone and die, multiplayer is also nice and the matchmaking is relatively speaking good, but you'll definitely see a few of those. And before going into a game you have to set up relics, not the first time but later on, and these relics can provide meaningful power-ups that can range from just simple stat upgrades to effects or items that you start with, or even better, upgrading skills. And trust me, this one is beautiful. It helps out a lot, especially as you progress through the game and it gets increasingly more difficult. The combat is your usual Souls combat while kicking up the speed a notch, but it still has the familiar minor clunkiness of the Souls games combat. And boss variety is present, but personally I started noticing it later on in the game after I've beaten quite a few Night Lords. And once you've beaten your first Night Lord, you'll unlock Shifting Earths, which is basically a random element in the map each time you play a game. And you can get one of 4 regions, the Volcanic, which is beautiful by the way, you want to go for that because it gives you the ability to upgrade your weapon to a legendary. Then you have the Frozen Peaks, the Scarlet Rot Forest, and the Shrouded City. And if you beat the final Night Lord, you can control the Shifting Earths, which is a nice bonus. The Night Lord's design and combat encounters are fun, they're varied, and they have different weaknesses that are very nice to abuse, honestly. Except for the Pest, screw that bastard. All in all, it's a nice fresh take that is fun and bug-free. So in this category, I'll give it a 2. Moving on, graphics and art style. Well, there's not really much to say here since this game reuses many assets from previous FromSoft titles, mainly Elden Ring, and also some Dark Souls. But that's mainly reserved for the bosses in what I've seen. But the tone in this game is a little bit darker, and honestly it runs well, so I'm just gonna give it 1 for, well, at least reusing the assets properly. But there's nothing mind-blowing here. If you've played Elden Ring, it's the same but with a darker tone, and it also runs fine at 60 FPS with no drops, at least for me. So I'll give it a 1 in this category. Next up, we got sound and music, which again is similar to the previous category, in terms of sound effects at least, because well, they didn't change much. But the music, the scores they play are really nice, and they're reminiscent of the Elden Ring music, but with more hopelessness to it, if it makes sense. And the Night Lord's battle music is beautiful. So in this category, I'm gonna give it a 2. Our fourth category, which is story and narrative, honestly, there's not really much to say about it, because this game is pretty much light on story. It's basically the Nightfarers fighting the Night Lords and trying to prevail in a parallel world, so there's not really much to it. Characters do have remembrance quests that give them some sort of depth, but honestly you do the remembrance quests mostly for the rewards, not for the character's story or lore. So in this category, I'm gonna give it a 0, flat out. The final category, the fun factor. Honestly, this is my personal preference, so you can take it with a grain of salt. I find it very nice to be able to play co-op with my friends in a Souls game without actually disconnecting after each and every boss, so that's a point for them. And it's just really fun to play with friends in general. And synergizing your abilities to pull off some fantastical moments mid-battle with your teammates is just beautiful. But on the other hand, it makes solo play not that great, and if you give up and decide to queue in with randoms, you're definitely gonna find John Nightreign waiting for you. He's gonna go off on his own, solo the entire place, and eventually die because he doesn't deal much damage and isn't playing with the team. So in this category, I'll give it a 1, especially because I don't find myself wanting to play the game if I'm going in solo. And yeah, that brings the total score up to a 6, which is above average. So in conclusion, Nightreign is a fun experience. It's a nice shift in direction for FromSoftware. I hope they get to experiment more with the core mechanics and try to change the flow of combat to be much more fast-paced like this one. And I'm looking forward to future Nightfarers and bosses in the updates that are coming. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.